Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Thomas always loved the road. Ever since he was young, he felt a strange peace watching the asphalt stretch out in front of him for hours. The sound of the engine, the stops at random gas stations, the coffee served in plastic cups, everything was part of the routine he'd learned to love. But more than anything, it was coming home that gave it all meaning. The image of Megan waiting for him, the smell of fresh coffee, the suitcase dropped in the corner of the living room. That was what kept him going. They'd been together for over 8 years. A quiet marriage, no kids, no big adventures, but with a consistency he truly valued. In Thomas's mind, stability was the same as success. When they first met, Megan worked as a receptionist at a small aesthetic clinic. She had a gentle smile and a calm look in her eyes that drew him in immediately. Thomas fell for her right away. They got married 2 years later, and from then on, their daily life revolved around his job. While he traveled, Megan took care of the house, paid the bills, scheduled maintenance, and handled small repairs as they came up. Everything ran like clockwork. He trusted her completely, and that was never something he questioned. His trips usually lasted 2 to 5 days, sometimes a little longer. Megan always showed her support. She said she admired his hard work and was proud of the man she'd married. And he believed every word. During the weeks apart, they stayed in constant touch. Good morning texts, voice messages in the late afternoon, video calls whenever possible. Megan sent photos of the meals she cooked, talked about the TV shows she watched, and shared plans for the weekend. Thomas responded with videos of the open road, stories about different customers, and little reminders for her to water the plants. There was something beautiful in that simple routine. When he came home, Megan always had the house spotless. The bed made with fresh sheets, the fridge stocked, the living room smelling of scented candles. He used to joke it was better than any hotel, and she'd smile, saying she did it all gladly. They didn't fight often. Of course, they argued like any couple, but things always got resolved quickly. Thomas was practical and avoided conflict. Megan, calmer by nature, usually gave in without much resistance. They never raised their voices at each other. Never argued about loyalty, boundaries, or personal space. Their trust was almost blind. He never checked her phone, never asked too many questions, never minded her occasional outings with friends or her sister. He was sure he was with someone who valued their marriage as much as he did. Once, Megan wanted to try selling handmade candles online. Thomas supported her, bought the initial supplies, and encouraged her to turn the hobby into a small side income. She got excited, set up a social media profile, even made a few deliveries around the neighborhood. But she gave up soon after. She said the returns were low, the work was demanding, and she didn't have enough time. He understood. He told her the most important thing was her happiness, and she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Megan smiled, thanked him for his support, and said she was lucky to have him as a husband. He believed her. On the last trip before the biggest breakup of his life, Thomas was gone for 4 days. The route was long, deliveries in different small towns across North Carolina, including a final stop near Charlotte. Even though Charlotte was less than 2 hours from home, the delivery schedule required overnight stays in distant places. He slept 2 nights in the cab of his truck and 1 in a cheap motel, just like always. During the trip, he talked to Megan every day. She seemed normal. She mentioned a plumbing issue in the kitchen, a new movie she wanted to watch with him, and even said she'd buy ingredients for his favorite meal over the weekend. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing at all. On the 4th night, after finishing the last delivery in a small town near Charlotte, Thomas looked at the clock. It was already past 8. His original plan was to sleep in the truck, like he did on almost every long trip. The next day, he'd stop by the freight company, wrap up the route, and only then head home. Megan knew this. She thought he was still far away, parked somewhere waiting for clearance. But standing at a quiet gas station, his truck now empty and his body exhausted, Thomas had a different idea. Instead of sleeping there, he decided to drive straight home. He wanted to see Megan, lie in his own bed, breathe in the familiar scent of their house. He didn't tell her. He thought it would be a nice surprise. He always believed the simplest gestures could reignite what routine had worn down. The drive back was smooth. Less than 2 hours separated Charlotte from home, and he knew the way like the back of his hand. The truck's radio played softly, and he didn't even need the GPS. When he entered the neighborhood, the dashboard clock read 2:56 a.m. Streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalks, and every house was dark. He slowed down and parked the truck 2 blocks away, just like he always did when he wanted to come home quietly. He grabbed his backpack from the back seat, locked the cab, and started walking. He was still thinking about Megan's face when she opened the door and saw him there. He'd even picked up a small gift from his last stop, a little box of homemade cookies she used to love. But as he reached the front of the house, something interrupted his expectations. The side gate was slightly open. Not wide open, but enough to show it hadn't been locked. He paused for a second. Megan was always careful about that. She was afraid of leaving gates or windows open at night. Thomas gently pushed it, stepped in, and walked along the side path to the porch. The front door wasn't locked either. He turned the knob easily and walked in quietly. The living room was silent. The TV was off, the couch untouched. The kitchen was dark. No sounds at all. He dropped his backpack on the floor without making a noise, took a deep breath, and began climbing the stairs. That's when he heard it. The unmistakable sound of the shower. Water running hard, like it had just been turned on. It was almost 3 in the morning. He climbed slowly. With each step, his chest tightened a little more. In his mind, the most logical explanation was that Megan had woken up hot or couldn't sleep. She sometimes did that, preferred a shower to relax. But even so, something felt off. The bedroom was dark. The bed was neatly made. No sign that anyone had slept there that night. He reached the bathroom door. Light on. Water running. And the door locked from the inside. He knocked lightly. Called her name. Nothing. He knocked again, louder this time. Megan? Silence. He pressed his ear against the wood. The sound of water was steady, but behind it, there was something else. Thomas stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the bathroom door. The silence after his louder knock felt even more violent than any scream. On the other side, the shower kept running, but now he heard it differently. It wasn't just water anymore. It was a cover-up, an attempt to hide something that couldn't hold up anymore. The lack of response, the lock turned from inside, each detail formed a sequence too precise to ignore. Still, he tried to stay calm. He took a deep breath, ran a hand over his face, and stepped back a few paces, as if physical distance could slow down what was happening inside him. But then he heard it. Not an accidental noise, not a creaking pipe, but a muffled laugh. Short. And right after, a voice. Deep, unmistakably male. That wasn't suspicion anymore. It was certainty. And with it came a heavy thud in his chest, like something had been ripped out of him without anesthesia. His mind spun, thoughts racing to make sense of what had just happened, but his body didn't wait. Thomas went back to the door and pounded it hard, now with a clenched fist, demanding it be opened. He shouted her name, his voice filled with disbelief and anger, each syllable spat out like pain. Inside, the water stopped. The new silence was followed by quick movements, things falling, urgent whispers exchanged. The doorknob turned slowly, as if whoever was in there was still fighting the reality waiting on the other side. When the bathroom door opened, Thomas was standing right in front, motionless, like a sentence waiting to be carried out. The man froze when he saw him. For a moment, the silence between them was so thick it felt like you could hear it. The lover held his crumpled clothes in his arms. He was only in a towel, dripping water, chest heaving. He just stood there, not knowing what to do, like he was still searching for an escape that didn't exist. His eyes dropped, unable to meet Thomas's. Without saying a word, he took a shaky step to the side, trying to slip past along the wall. Thomas didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stared, eyes locked, jaw clenched, his whole body tense with restrained energy. The man hurried past him, nearly stumbling over his own feet. He clutched his clothes to his chest like a shield, like he could hide behind his shame. As soon as he had enough space, he bolted down the hallway. He ran through the living room, rushed out the front door, and disappeared down the street, still wearing only a towel around his waist and clothes in his hands. The scene was pathetic and desperate. A man running away, not just from a house, but from the guilt he left behind. Thomas stayed there, unresponsive. He didn't need to chase after him. What mattered had already been destroyed. And standing in front of that open door, the smell of soap still in the air, he realized nothing would ever be the same again. Soon after, Megan appeared. The towel wrapped around her wet body trembled along with her. Her face was pale, eyes wide, trying to figure out in seconds how to face the husband who should never have been there at that moment. Thomas didn't give her time to explain. Didn't blink, didn't look away. He took one step forward and fired the question like a punch. Who is he, Megan? His name. Now. She stepped back, stumbling against the door frame. She tried to say something, but her voice came out shaky, broken. It's not what you think, it was all a mistake. A mistake? Thomas repeated, stunned. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is burning the rice. This isn't a mistake, Megan. This is a choice. And you made it. His voice wasn't shouting anymore. It was something sharper. Cold. Precise. Megan tried to move closer, hand reaching out, but he pulled away like her touch was poison. You brought him here, to our house, while I was out working to support all of this. He pointed around, as if every wall was a witness. You slept with me on Sunday and, 4 days later, you brought another man to shower in my bathroom? She started crying, trying to cover her face, but he didn't let up. Don't cry now, Megan. You had time to think about this before. You had time to say you were unhappy. But you chose to lie instead. You chose to do this. She collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking from sobs. But Thomas didn't soften. The pain he felt had gone past shock. He was in another stage now, where love had turned to disgust and broken trust had become clarity. He looked at her for a few more seconds, like he was memorizing the image of the woman he thought he knew. And in that look was everything, the hurt, the humiliation, the outrage, and above all, the end. An end that now had shape, name, and face. Megan stayed on the hallway floor, face buried in her hands, trying to hold back the sobs tearing her apart. Thomas didn't look away. He felt he had to keep his feet planted, even though his whole body wanted to collapse. The anger wasn't loud, it came from awareness. It was the kind of pain that doesn't explode, but burns slowly, consuming from the inside everything that once felt like home. He went downstairs. He didn't want to hear anything else. He'd already heard enough. Every word she said from now on would just feel like an insult. The time for explanations ended the moment that bathroom door opened. In the living room, the air felt heavier, like the space carried the shame left behind by the man who had just fled minutes before. Thomas saw the backpack he dropped when he arrived, still holding the cookies. For some reason, that was the breaking point. The image of the small gift, thoughtfully chosen, now seemed ridiculous. He grabbed the bag and threw it in the trash without thinking. Then, he went to the sideboard drawer where they kept their cards. He opened his wallet, pulled out her secondary card, and snapped it in half with his own hands. The pieces fell onto the table with a dull sound. He went back upstairs, ignoring the muffled sounds from the hallway, entered the bedroom, and started grabbing some clothes. He didn't know if he was leaving or making her leave, but he couldn't stand still. When he returned to the hallway, Megan was still there. She lifted her face, red and swollen-eyed. Thomas, holding a suitcase in one hand, pointed to the door. "Go. Get dressed. You're leaving now." She hesitated, tried to say something, but he raised his voice. "Don't make me repeat myself. You exposed me, lied to me, disrespected everything we built. The least you can do is leave with a shred of dignity." Megan got up slowly, trembling. Thomas heard drawers being yanked open, zippers, hangers falling. Each sound was another confirmation that it was over. There was no going back. No excuse. He knew from this moment on, everything would change. About 20 minutes later, she came down with a rolling suitcase. Eyes still down, breathing shaky. Thomas was sitting on the couch, motionless. When she approached, she stopped in front of him and tried one last time. "I know I messed up. But please, just listen. Just 1 minute." He didn't answer. Just nodded toward the door. Megan hesitated again, but understood there was no room for conversation. She slowly opened the door, like each inch was a struggle against her own shame. She paused on the porch, looked around like she expected to see her lover's car, but the street was empty. She pulled out her phone, called, waited. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. Sent a message. Last seen 2 hours ago. The cold truth hit her hard. She was alone. Thomas stayed in the living room, watching through a crack in the door. He saw her sit on the porch steps with her suitcase beside her, not knowing where to go. For the first time since he arrived, he felt pity. But he didn't move. It was a distant pity, without compassion. The kind of feeling that only appears when love is already gone. Then, he took off his wedding ring and placed it on the table. That endless night, Thomas walked up the stairs quietly and entered the bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor for long minutes, trying to understand how everything had changed in such a short time. Just hours ago, he believed his life was stable, even if ordinary. He was proud of what they'd built, despite the challenges. But now, there was a hole where certainty used to be. The image of her with another man in his house was an open wound that wouldn't heal with time. He needed to act, needed to take back control of his own story. Early the next morning, he picked up his phone and started doing what had once seemed unimaginable. The first call was to the condo manager. He said there'd been a serious issue and he needed the locks changed immediately. He explained he couldn't wait until business hours, and they offered to send a trusted technician right away. Then, he blocked her access to the home alarm app, the electric gate control, and their shared accounts. He cancelled her secondary credit card and changed the passwords for all the digital services they used together. It was like he needed to erase her digital presence from his life. Not out of revenge, but out of survival instinct. Each action was a way to make sure he wouldn't wake up vulnerable again. By 8 in the morning, Thomas still hadn't slept. He got dressed, grabbed his documents, and went to a diner near downtown. He ordered a black coffee and sat alone at a corner table. He used his phone to find a divorce lawyer and scheduled an appointment for that same day. He didn't want to waste time. He knew any hesitation could be used against him later. He also called a trusted friend who'd been through a tough divorce and listened carefully to every piece of advice. The humiliation still weighed on his chest, but he wouldn't let himself cry. He was focused on what needed to be done. Emotions could wait. Right now, it was about protecting what was left. Megan, on the other hand, Once she left the house with her phone in hand and suitcase beside her, called her lover several times, but he never answered. She tried going to the parking lot where he usually left his car, but it wasn't there. She walked a few blocks, trying to figure out where to spend the rest of the night, until finally, she called a friend and asked for temporary shelter. She slept a few hours on a tight couch, listening to the sound of her own regret. The next day, she tried reaching Thomas again. Sent long messages, begging to talk, offering explanations. He read them, but didn't reply. There was no room left for rebuilding. The lawyer Thomas met was direct, experienced, and efficient. He explained what was needed to start the divorce and how to handle asset division. Thomas was honest about what happened. He said he didn't want a war, but he wouldn't accept unfairness either. The lawyer suggested he document everything as soon as possible. In the days that followed, Thomas did what few expect from someone emotionally shattered. He was methodical. He gathered documents, handled bills, adjusted the house lease terms, reviewed the car papers, updated his banking status, and changed ownership on service accounts. Meanwhile, Megan faced what she never imagined: the lover had abandoned her. After the scandal, he cut off all contact. He said he didn't want to get involved in a messy divorce and had no interest in continuing the relationship. He claimed it was just a moment, that he'd never promised anything serious. Megan was left alone. Without her husband, without her lover, without direction. She tried going back home a few days later, but found the locks changed. She knocked on the door for minutes. Shouted. Begged. Thomas didn't open. He watched from the bedroom window, not moving a muscle. There was nothing left to say. Everything they needed to resolve would go through lawyers. What remained was the echo of a choice that couldn't be undone. Megan had to rent a small room in a city boarding house while she looked for work and tried to start over. Most of their mutual friends drifted away. Some out of embarrassment, others out of loyalty to Thomas. He, on the other hand, moved forward in silence. He didn't post hints, didn't talk to neighbors, didn't vent publicly. His response was action. Firmness. The maturity of someone who knows betrayal isn't fought with drama, but with dignity. With decisions. Months later, the divorce was finalized. Thomas moved into a smaller, simpler house, his own. He took only what he needed and left the rest behind, along with the traces of a marriage that no longer existed. Slowly, he got back into his routine. He kept working as a truck driver, but now he followed routes that didn't lead back to an empty place. He learned to live alone, without rushing, without needing to fill the silence. He carried scars, but he also found peace. As for Megan, she learned to live with the consequences of her choices. The betrayal didn't just cost her a marriage. It cost her respect, stability, and the trust of someone who once saw her as his safe harbor. Her mistake wasn't just cheating. It was believing nothing would happen. That forgiveness would always be there, that everything could be fixed with tears and empty promises. But that night, with the shower running and the door locked, she sealed her own fate. And no matter how much time passes, some decisions echo forever. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.